In front of me was a perfect resume, until I saw the name on the first page. At 18, they stuffed a $20 bill into my hand and kicked me out for your sister's future. Today, that sister sits before me, waiting for an interview. I hit the record button and asked, "What does fairness mean to you?" "My name is Rebecca Rollins. I am 23 years old, and I am the founder and CEO of North Star Grid." The elevator doors that lead to my office on the 28th floor do not ding. They open with a soft, expensive sigh, releasing me into an atmosphere of pressurized glass and filtered air. This is my world, the one I built from scratch, a world of clean lines, hard data, and absolute accountability. I walked into the summit, our main conference room. Its western wall is a floor-to-ceiling plate of glass that frames the Rocky Mountains. The peaks were sharp against the deep blue of the high-altitude sky, their tops shrouded in a fresh, unforgiving layer of snow. They are a constant reminder. Some things are immovable. Sarah, my head of human resources, was already at the polished concrete table. She is efficient, kind, and meticulous about our hiring protocols. She also believes my name has always been Rollins. "Morning, Rebecca," she said, her voice quiet. "The 9 o'clock is checked in and waiting in the lobby. She's impressive. I've put the hard copy you requested on the table." I nodded, my eyes fixed on the folder already in my place at the head of the table. It was heavy cardstock. On the label, typed in our standard font, were 2 words: Brooke Lena. A name I had not seen in print for 5 years, not since I had legally shed it, along with 18 years of history. Lena Brooke, my sister, the golden child, the one for whom the entire family system had been engineered. My heart didn't pound, my hands didn't shake. Instead, a familiar sensation settled in my chest, a cold, dense compression. It was the feeling of a system under sudden immense load. I sat down and opened the folder. It was, as Sarah noted, impressive. A perfect grade point average from Rockview State University. Glowing recommendations from professors I'm sure adored her. 2 years as a team lead at Greenway Logistics. A solid mid-level competitor. She was, on paper, exactly the kind of candidate we look for. Competent, driven, and thanks to Greenway's recent mass layoffs, available. I looked up from the paper, letting my gaze sweep the room. It was sterile by design. One wall was a vast, empty whiteboard, spotless, waiting for a problem to be diagrammed. The other was the glass, looking out at the mountains. The silence was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the building's climate control. From the pocket of my blazer, I removed the small, silver digital recorder, a mandatory step for all senior-level interviews. I placed it in the precise center of the table. I pressed the button. A tiny ruby-red light blinked on. Steady. The room was now listening. My eyes drifted to the built-in steel shelving behind Sarah's seat. Next to a perfectly scaled model of an automated sorting hub and 3 industry awards for logistical innovation, there sat a simple, modern black frame. Inside it, mounted on archival white matting, was a single, faded $20 bill. It was creased almost to softness. The ink blurred in one corner as if by water. The edges were frayed. My inheritance, my severance package, my seed capital. Sarah, who had placed it there after hearing some sanitized version of my story, believed it was the first dollar the company ever earned. A motivational cliché I never bothered to correct. It was, in fact, the last dollar I ever took. "I'll conduct this one alone to start. Sarah," I said, not looking away from the frame. "Please, send her in." Sarah nodded, gathered her own tablet, and left the room, the door closing with that same soft, pneumatic sigh. I am Rebecca Rollins, founder and CEO, but for the next hour, I was simply Ms. The final stage assessor for the senior operations manager role. This was my company, built on my rules, and the first rule of North Star Grid is radical objectivity. We do not hire resumes, we hire problem solvers. We do not care where you came from, what school you attended, or who you know. We care only about one thing. What do you do when the system breaks? Lena hadn't seen me in 5 years. The girl she last saw was 18. Underweight, and standing in the rain. That girl was gone. My hair, once stringy and perpetually damp from the Ohio humidity, was now cut in a severe dark bob that fell just at my jaw. The worn-out fleece and borrowed jeans had been replaced by a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than our parents' mortgage payment. I was no longer the girl on the metal bench. I was the woman who owned the building. She would not recognize me unless I wanted her to, and I did not. The door opened. Lena Brooke walked in. She was exactly the same, just more polished, the same easy practice smile that always won over our parents, the same inherent confidence in her posture, the casual assumption that any room she entered was happy to have her. She was nervous, but it was the competent, acceptable nervousness of a top candidate, not the gnawing fear of someone with no safety net. Her eyes met mine. I watched her pupils, looking for the flicker. There it was, not recognition, assessment. She was assessing the woman at the head of the table, a woman who looked perhaps a few years older than her, a woman who held the power. To her, I was just the final boss in her interview process. "Ms. Brooke, thank you for coming in." My voice was flat, even colder than the air outside. "Please, sit down." "Thank you." "Ms. Rollins," she said, taking the seat opposite me. "It's an honor to be here. I'm a huge admirer of what you've built at North Star." She didn't know the name. Of course she didn't. I had taken the name Rollins the day I filed the incorporation papers. It was the name of the street that Haven Row House, the women's shelter in Denver, was on. I let the silence stretch, letting the little red light on the recorder soak it up. I stared at her, my face impassive. She shifted, her smile tightening just a fraction. "We will skip the usual, walk me through your resume," I said. Finally, I closed the folder in front of me with a quiet, definitive thud. "We have read it. We test for application here, not recitation. Let's begin with a behavioral query." I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the table. "Tell me about a time you witnessed or experienced a significant, demonstrable unfairness within a team project. What was the situation, and what, specifically, did you do to rectify it?" She was good. I had to give her that. She didn't even blink. She launched into a perfectly rehearsed, textbook-perfect answer. It was a story from her time at Greenway Logistics, a junior analyst on her team. She explained, had been repeatedly passed over for a promotion in favor of another employee who was, she hinted, a personal favorite of a senior manager. "It was a clear case of favoritism," Lena said, her tone filled with the practiced integrity of someone who knows what management wants to hear. "It was deeply damaging to team morale, and frankly, it was inefficient. The metrics of the overlooked employee were quantifiably better. I couldn't let it stand. So," she continued, "I gathered the performance metrics for both employees from the past 2 quarters. I documented the discrepancy in output, error rates, and client feedback. I then scheduled a private meeting with the department head and presented the data, focusing objectively on output and efficiency, not on emotion or personalities." As she spoke, her gaze, which had been locked on mine, drifted. It moved past my shoulder, toward the steel shelf. It snagged on the black frame, on the $20 bill. Her voice, which had been so smooth, hitched for just half a second. "It's about maintaining a level playing field. For everyone." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of deep, primal confusion. A $20 bill. Why frame that? It was just a piece of money. It meant nothing to her. Why would it? She wasn't the one who had to make it last for a week. She wasn't the one who had to choose between a bus ticket out of town and a bottle of fever reducer. The sight of her looking at my $20 was the trigger. The image flashed, hot and sharp, behind my eyes, not a memory, but a phantom sensation. The biting, metallic cold of a bus station bench. Cedar Grove, Ohio, 3:30 in the morning, the smell of diesel fumes and stale urine, the sound of freezing rain hitting the plexiglass shelter. A desperate, angry percussion, the agonizing dampness seeping through the knees of my jeans, the cold settling into my bones, and in the pocket of my thin jacket, a single, crumpled $20 bill, damp from the sweat of my terrified fist. My mother's voice, not angry, just final, resigned. Be practical. Rebecca, Lena has real potential. She has her leadership camps, her college prep. We have to focus our resources. You're 18 now. It's time for you to stand on your own 2 feet. The sound of the deadbolt sliding shut, a sound louder than any shout, the rectangle of the living room light, warm and yellow, disappearing as I turned away. I blinked. The glass room, the snowy mountains, the recorder's red light. Lena had finished her answer, looking pleased with herself. I picked up my pen. It was a heavy, milled steel pen. The weight felt good, solid, in my hand. A good answer, I said. Data-driven, now, a scenario. I set the pen down, aligning it perfectly with the edge of my notepad. You are managing a critical logistics route. Your best driver, a consistent high performer with a perfect on-time record, is suddenly reassigned by upper management without explanation. Their replacement is a new hire, objectively slower, and you recognize them as a personal connection, say the nephew, of a senior executive. This change immediately jeopardizes your delivery timelines by at least 12% and is causing significant frustration on your team. The order stands. What do you do? This time, she hesitated. The smooth corporate polish cracked. This wasn't a behavioral question she had found on a website. This was a systems problem, an unfair systems problem. This was my life, distilled into a business case. Well, she began, her gaze flickering, I would first escalate to the executive who made the change, to try and understand the reasoning behind it. The executive is unavailable, I cut in, my voice sharp. The order is final. Then I would have to speak to the team, manage their expectations. She was flailing, searching for the right answer, the one that showed both obedience to hierarchy and leadership to her team. I would try to train the new person up as fast as possible, get them optimized. So you accept the inefficiency, I stated. It was not a question. You accept the 12% loss. You accept the unfairness to your team and to the original driver. No, she said, a little too quickly. I mean, I would document everything. The performance drop, the breach of protocol. If there was one, it's about transparency, making sure the impact is visible. I uncapped my pen. The click was loud in the quiet room. On the crisp, white notepad in front of me, I wrote 3 words. Fairness, transparency, accountability. She used the words. She had no idea what they cost. I looked at the woman across the table, my sister. She was smart. She was capable. She was also the product of a system that had always bent in her favor. She had never sat on the metal bench. She had never known the specific, visceral hunger of having no options. She talked about fairness. I had built a $100 million company out of the absence of it. I couldn't hire her based on this, but I couldn't not hire her based on my past. That would make me no better than our parents. The data was incomplete. I needed to see her act, not talk. I needed to see what she did when the system was truly broken, not just inconvenient. I put the cap back on my pen. Click. Thank you, Ms. Brooke. Your resume is impressive, and your answers are noted. I stood up. She scrambled to her feet, a look of confusion on her face. The interview had only lasted 15 minutes. North Star Grid is a practical company, I said, walking toward the door. We solve problems that are happening right now, not in theory. The next stage of our process is not a traditional interview. Sarah, who must have been waiting outside, stepped back in, holding a tablet. The final stage, I continued, is a 1-day operational audit at a partner warehouse. We embed our final candidates in a live environment. You will be given access to our systems and faced with real-time data failures, personnel conflicts, and critical shipment deadlines. We want to see how you move. We want to see how you fix a broken system under pressure. Sarah handed Lena the tablet, which contained the NDA and the details for the test. Lena's eyes widened, but she recovered quickly, the ambition glittering in her eyes. I'm ready for it. When is it? Tomorrow, I said. 6 a.m. Blue Mesa Outdoors Fulfillment Center. Be prepared. She nodded, the confident smile returning. I will be, thank you, Ms. Rollins. She gathered her portfolio and left, the door side shut, leaving me alone in the room. I walked to the glass wall, close enough to feel the cold radiating from it. I watched the wind whip tiny plumes of snow off the highest peaks. Lena Brooke thought she was interviewing for a job. She had no idea. She was being tested for the one thing our family never taught her: consequences. And I would let the data, her data, speak for itself. Before I built a company of glass and steel on the 28th floor, I lived in a house of silence and drywall in Cedar Grove, Ohio. Cedar Grove wasn't a town. It was a holding pattern. It was a grid of identical streets carved out of the endless, flat expanse of the Midwest. The cornfields were not a rustic backdrop. They were the boundaries. They were tall, green walls that marked the precise edge of every identical dream. Our street was lined with identical mailboxes, and for 3 blocks, they all had the same name stenciled on the side. Brooke. It was a name I shared, a unit I was technically part of, but never a member of. The center of our universe, the place where the family's gravitational pull was strongest, was the dinner table. It was a heavy, dark wood table, a family heirloom from Miriam's side. It had 4 matching, high-backed wooden chairs, one for my father, Gareth, one for my mother, Miriam, one for my sister, Lena, and one for me. My chair was a metal folding chair. It had been brought in from the garage when I was old enough to sit at the table and had never left. It was gray, cold, and the rubber caps on its feet were cracked, exposing the metal. Every time I moved, every time I shifted my weight or reached for the salt, the joints would let out a thin metallic complaint, a high-pitched creak that cut through the silence. It was the only sound I was allowed to make. That chair was my entire childhood. Summarized, I was the addendum, the afterthought, the temporary fix that had become permanent. My father, Gareth, was a man who believed emotion was a nuisance. He didn't just dislike feelings, he found them to be a mark of inefficiency, a flaw in the system. He worked as an accountant for a local feed company, and he moved through our house with the same joyless precision, auditing our lives for wasted energy. A C+ on a report card was an error in calculation. Tears were a failure of processing. His response to any outburst was a deep, weary sigh and 2 words: be practical. My mother, Miriam, was different. She was obsessed with appearances. Our house was spotless, but it had the sterile, unwelcoming chill of a showroom. She didn't clean for comfort, she cleaned for inspection, and Lena was her masterpiece. Lena was bright, pretty, and effortlessly charming. She was a reflection of all Miriam's aspirations. Lena was the golden child because she made Miriam look good. I, on the other hand, was a problem. I was quiet, intense, and I didn't reflect anything. I absorbed. I watched. The disparity in the system was not hidden. It was policy. For Lena's 16th birthday, there was a used 1999 sedan in the driveway with a comically large red bow on the hood. It was a public performance of parental generosity. My parents stood on the lawn, beaming, as Miriam took photo after photo for the local paper. For my 16th birthday, 6 months later, I was handed a small paper envelope at the dinner table. Inside was a $25 book voucher for the local bookstore. To encourage your reading, Rebecca, Gareth said, not looking up from his plate. A practical gift. Lena was given the world. I was given a task. She thrived in the spotlight, joining the debate team, running for student council, being the lead in the school play. I found my solace in the shadows of the garage, surrounded by my father's discarded junk. I found I had a talent for it. I loved taking things apart. Old radios, broken fans, clocks that had stopped ticking. I would lay the pieces out on an old towel, clean the contacts, find the broken wire or the jammed gear. I was looking for the logic in a house run on the arbitrary, emotional whims of my parents. The inside of a machine was a sanctuary. The wires were honest. The circuits followed rules. Positive went to positive. Negative went to negative. A broken connection stopped the flow. A completed circuit brought the machine back to life. It was clean. It was fair. I found an order in the tangle of copper and solder that I could not find in my own home. When I was 17, I built a multi-stage water filtration system for the state science fair. It was designed to filter agricultural runoff from the cornfields. I had identified a real, systemic problem in our town and engineered a practical solution. I won. First place in the state. I came home carrying the oversized blue ribbon and the laminated certificate. I walked into the kitchen, where the family was, for once, gathered. "I won," I said, my voice quiet. I held up the ribbon. Gareth grunted. Miriam looked up from the catalog she was reading. "Oh, Rebecca, that's very nice, dear. Good for you." And then, before I could even explain what the project was, she clapped her hands together, a brittle, dry sound. "Lena, honey, tell your father the wonderful news about the state leadership retreat. They chose her for the keynote address." And just like that, the gravity of the room shifted. The spotlight snapped to Lena, who blushed and began to tell her story. My blue ribbon, my state-level achievement, was placed on the edge of the counter, where it sat next to the junk mail. I stood there, invisible again, the metallic creak of my folding chair at the dinner table echoing in my head. The primary law of our house was simple: don't make a scene. This law was the operating code for the entire system. Don't make a scene meant, do not ask for things we have not already decided to give you. Do not express an opinion that contradicts ours. Do not show anger, sadness, or frustration. Do not, under any circumstances, pull focus from Lena. My winning the science fair was a scene. It was an inefficient, emotional, and distracting scene. A year later, the letter came. I had secretly applied to Rockview State University, 2 states over. They had one of the best supply chain management programs in the country. I had read the course catalog online at the library. It was a curriculum built on systems, logistics, and efficiency. It was a language I already understood. I got the mail. The envelope was thick. I opened it right there on the sidewalk, by the mailbox that bore our shared name. I was in. They were offering me a partial academic scholarship. It wasn't a full ride. It wouldn't cover everything. But it was a path. It was an escape route, built on merit. I waited until dinner. I sat on my cold, creaking chair. The sounds of the meal were the same as always. The click of silverware on porcelain, the rustle of Gareth's newspaper, the quiet, pointed questions Miriam aimed at Lena about her day. I put the letter on the table. I was accepted, I said. The silence that fell was not the usual, empty quiet. It was heavy, tense. Gareth put his fork down. Accepted where? Rockview State University, for their logistics program. They've given me a partial scholarship. Miriam's hand flew to her throat. Rockview? That's not what we discussed. We never discussed anything, I said, and the creak of my chair as I shifted was deafening. I need help with the rest of the tuition. For the first year, after that, I can get a job. I can... No, Gareth said. It was flat, final. Gareth, Miriam said, her voice a warning. No, he repeated, looking at me. For the first time, he was looking right at me. His eyes were not angry. They were, I realized, just tired. I was a column in his ledger that would not balance. Lena is attending her first choice of liberal arts colleges next fall. Her tuition, as you know, is significant, We have to be practical. We must focus our resources. Lena has real potential, Miriam added, her voice regaining its strength. She is going to be someone. She needs this. I have potential, I whispered, the words feeling dry and useless. I won the state science fair. I can do this. Gareth let out that sigh, the one that meant I was being inefficient. That is a hobby. Rebecca, this is real life. You are 18 years old. You are an adult. We have provided you with a home and food. Our obligation is fulfilled. It is time for you to stand on your own 2 feet. You are on your own. It was not a negotiation. It was a verdict. I did not cry. I did not shout. I did not make a scene. I just nodded. I stood up, my chair giving one last, final creak. I went to my room. I took the single, worn suitcase from the top of my closet. I packed my few clothes. I packed the schematics for my filtration project. I left the blue ribbon. When I came downstairs, the house was silent. Lena was in her room. Gareth was in his study. Miriam was waiting for me by the front door. Her arms crossed. Her face was not sad. It was tight, pale, and, I realized with a sudden, cold clarity, it was relieved. The system had finally corrected its error. The temporary chair was being removed. She did not hug me. She did not say she loved me. She reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled something out. She grabbed my hand, her fingers cold and dry, and pressed something into my palm. Here, she whispered, her eyes darting toward the study. Don't say we never gave you anything. Now go, and be quiet about it. I opened my hand. It was a single, crumpled, $20 bill. I looked at it. Then I looked at her, the woman who had given me life, and then rescinded the offer. I opened my mouth, but the law was the law. I just nodded. I opened the front door. The thick, humid Ohio air hit me, and the first drops of a cold, miserable rain began to fall. I stepped outside. I heard the lock. A single, sharp click. The deadbolt sliding into place. The sound was absolute. It was the sound of a circuit being permanently broken. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. A thunderclap in the suffocating quiet. I stood on the sidewalk for a long minute. The rain was harder now, cold, plastering my hair to my face, my suitcase handle, cheap plastic, dug into my palm. I looked back at the house. The living room window was a perfect, warm, yellow square against the dark. I could see their silhouettes moving inside, oblivious, a perfect picture of a family, settling in for the night. It was the most alien thing I had ever seen. I turned away from the light. One of the wheels on my suitcase was broken, and it wobbled and dragged on the pavement. I yanked it free and started the long walk to the bus station. The bus station in Cedar Grove was not a hub of travel. It was a single, windswept room with a row of molded plastic chairs and a humming vending machine. The 3:30 a.m. bus to Columbus was the last one until dawn. I watched its headlights cut through the rain, a momentary pulse of hope. I stood up, my muscles screaming. The cold had settled deep in my chest. The rain from the long walk had soaked me, and now a dry, rattling heat was radiating from my skin. Fever. The bus slowed. I grabbed my suitcase. The driver looked at me. A single, shivering girl with a broken bag, and then he looked at his watch. He was 2 minutes behind schedule. He shook his head. The doors never opened. The hiss of the air brakes releasing was a sound of final, absolute rejection. I watched the red taillights disappear. I sat back down on the metal bench. The cold was a living thing, seeping into me. My breathing became shallow, a thin whistling sound. The $20 bill in my pocket felt like a useless, damp piece of paper. The world, the linoleum floor, the buzzing fluorescent light, began to tilt and blur. I must have slumped over. The next thing I knew, a shadow was standing over me. Hey, kid. I tried to focus. It was a man, middle-aged, wearing a trucker hat and a worn-out denim jacket. His face was lined with exhaustion. You're burning up, he said. His voice was rough, like gravel. You waiting for someone? I shook my head. but the movement sent a spike of pain through my temples. He disappeared for a moment and came back from the vending machine. He didn't hand me a soda. He handed me a steaming styrofoam cup. Coffee. It's burnt, but it's hot. I took it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. The heat was shocking. The first real warmth I had felt in hours. I drank. It was, in fact, burnt. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. He watched me for a second. "You're in a bad way. I'm calling a ride." He didn't ask questions. He didn't ask where I came from or where I was going. He pulled out an old flip phone, made a call, and reported a medical emergency at the bus station. He gave my description. "Looks like exposure," he said, like he was reporting a faulty piece of machinery. He waited with me, standing a few feet away, a silent, awkward guardian. When the ambulance arrived, I tried to give him back the 90 cents of change from the coffee. "Keep it," he said, turning to leave. "What's your name?" I managed to get out, the words scratching my throat. He paused, adjusting his cap. "Keegan, now get in the ambulance. Kid, you're holding up the system." I woke up to the smell of antiseptic and the steady, rhythmic beep of a machine. The fluorescent lights were brighter here, more insistent. I was on a gurney in a hospital hallway. A thin, heated blanket draped over me. The fever had broken, leaving me feeling hollowed out, scoured. A nurse, her face kind but exhausted, stopped by. "You're awake. Good. We're getting you a bed. The doctor will be by." She was checking my wrist. I looked down. A plastic bracelet had been snapped around it. My name, misspelled as Brooke Rebecca, and below it, a single line of black text. Address, undetermined. I was nobody, from nowhere. I was an error in the intake form. They kept me for 2 days. Severe exposure and the beginnings of pneumonia. I spent the time staring at the acoustic tile ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of the hospital. I was a ghost, haunting a hallway. When I was finally discharged, a woman from billing stopped me at the desk. "You have no insurance on file," she said, not unkindly. "Your copayment and out-of-pocket balance is $184. How will you be settling that?" I stared at her. My hand went to my pocket. The $20 bill was still there. It was my entire net worth. I pulled it out. The woman looked at the bill, then at my face. She sighed. "Hold on." She typed something into her computer. "Oh, it seems your outstanding balance was settled this morning. A Mr. Keegan paid the remainder." I just stood there. "He left this for you," she said, handing me the paid-in-full receipt. There was no note, no message, just a zero balance. He hadn't saved my life. He had balanced the books. He had seen a debt in the system and paid it. A practical man. I walked out of the hospital into the flat. Gray Ohio morning. In my pocket, I had 2 things. A crumpled $20 bill and a plastic hospital bracelet that said, "Address, undetermined." This was my new inheritance. This was my spiritual seed capital. The $20 was the proof of my rejection. The bracelet was the proof of my existence. Separate from them, I would keep them both. I used the $20 to buy a one-way bus ticket. I didn't care where, just west, away from the flat, suffocating grip of the cornfields. The ticket took me to Denver. I arrived with nothing but my broken suitcase and the receipt from Mr. Keegan. I found my way to a women's shelter, Haven Row House. It was on a street called Rollins. The shelter was a stark brick building. It did not smell like a home. It smelled of industrial-strength bleach and old metal bed frames. It was not a place of comfort. It was a place of function. It was a system for survival. I was assigned a cot in a room with 3 other women who did not speak, their faces blank with their own private wars. The silence here was different from the silence at my parents' dinner table. That silence had been a weapon, heavy and full of unsaid rules. This silence was just empty. It was hollow. And for the first time in my life, I was not afraid of it. The rain in Denver was different, too. It was a thin, cold mist that felt like it was cleaning the world, not drowning it. I couldn't stay on the cot. I couldn't be idle. I went to the woman who ran the front desk. "I can work," I said. She pointed me to a back room. "We need volunteers. Sort the donations." The room was chaos, a mountain of black trash bags, filled with clothes, expired food, broken toys, and mismatched shoes. It was a physical manifestation of a broken system. My hands began to remember. I grabbed a bag. I ripped it open. I started to sort. This is a shirt. Size medium. Winter. This is a can of soup. Edible. These are shoes. Left and right. Size 9. I found empty boxes and began to label them. I worked for hours, then days. My mind, which had been a frantic, terrified animal, finally calmed. I was finding the logic. I was taking chaos, and I was creating order. I was cleaning, sorting, stacking. I was building a system from the wreckage. I stayed at Haven Row House for 3 weeks. I sorted the entire donation room. I reorganized the kitchen pantry by expiration date. I created a check-in and check-out sheet for the linens, saving the shelter 2 hours of laundry time a day. My hands remembered the feeling of fitting wires together, of making a circuit complete. One afternoon, I was walking down Blake Street. The rain was a fine, cold mist. I saw a piece of paper taped to a lamppost, the ink running slightly. Alvarez's on Blake. Morning shift needed. Apply within. I walked in. The place was a shock to the senses. The smell of hot chorizo, fresh coffee, and onions frying in grease. It was loud. It was warm. It was alive. A woman, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, was standing behind the counter, yelling at a cook in Spanish. She looked up as I entered, her eyes sharp. She wiped her hands on an apron that had seen better decades. "What do you want?" "I'm here for the morning shift," I said. She looked me up and down. I was thin. I was pale. I was wearing donated clothes that didn't quite fit, but my eyes were steady. "You ever worked a line?" "No, but I'm smart and I work hard. I can do anything you tell me to do." She grunted. "Everyone says that." She pointed to the massive, hissing espresso machine. "You start tomorrow, 6 a.m. That's when the construction guys get here. They are mean until they get coffee. This machine is a beast. If you can't learn it by 7, you're out. If you break a single cup, you're out. If you make it to Friday, we talk pay." "I'll be here," I said. She nodded, turning back to the cook. "Tia Alvarez," she said over her shoulder, by way of introduction. "Don't be late." The first morning was hell. I was slow. I burned my hands. I got the orders wrong. But I didn't stop. I didn't cry. I just watched. I watched Tia. I watched the cooks. I watched the customers. I started to see the system. By Wednesday, I had the machine down. By Thursday, I was anticipating the orders. On Friday, Tia Alvarez wordlessly handed me a small, white envelope with cash in it. I had survived. I was wiping down the counter, my arms aching, when I watched Tia handle a grizzled old man named Frank. She slid his coffee across the counter before he even sat down. "Black, 2 sugars. Frank, you're early," she said. "Wife's mad at me," he grumbled. "You probably deserved it," she shot back, and he laughed. "Tia," I said, after he left. "You remember everyone's order." She snorted, not looking up from the register. "Kid, I don't remember their orders. I remember them. They aren't paying $5 for burnt coffee. They're paying $5 to be seen. They pay to be remembered for 2 minutes before they go out into a world that doesn't give a damn about them. You remember that, kid. That's the business." I stopped wiping. It was a revelation. A system. Not a system of wires or filters, but a system of human connection. Customers weren't just inputs. They were assets. They paid to be remembered. I looked at my reflection in the clean steel of the espresso machine. I was still pale. I was still thin. But my eyes were different. They were calculating. I could learn this system. I could build on it. Tia Alvarez's lesson lodged itself in my brain. They paid to be remembered. It was a system, just like the wiring in a radio, but it was an inefficient, chaotic system. I watched Tia run herself ragged, yelling at cooks, taking orders, managing the register, while two servers stood polishing the same glasses. I watched her over-order milk and run out of coffee beans. The place ran on her sheer force of will, but it was leaking energy and money at every joint. The chaos started to itch. I took my first week's cash pay, a small, crumpled wad of bills, and I didn't spend it on clothes or a bus pass. I went to an office supply store. I bought a thick, hardbound ledger, a ruler, and a pack of 4 different colored pens. I still had my 6 a.m. shift, but now, during my 30-minute break, I didn't sit. I stood in the walk-in refrigerator. I didn't just look. I counted. I categorized. Limes, avocados, blocks of cheese, bags of chorizo. Tia ordered when her eye told her something was low. I started tracking consumption velocity. I wrote it all down in my new ledger. Monday a.m., 12 avocados. Monday, 8 avocados. Tuesday a.m., 15 avocados. I cross-referenced this with the register tape. The data told a story. Our breakfast burrito special, which Tia thought was a low seller, was actually driving 70% of our morning rush, but it was bottlenecked by a slow grill and inefficient prep. I started diagramming the restaurant floor plan on the blank pages of my ledger. The coffee machine was too far from the cash register. The milk was in the back of the walk-in. I calculated the wasted seconds. After a week, I approached Tia. It was after the lunch rush, the first moment of quiet. "Tia, you are wasting money." She looked up from her receipts, her expression dangerous. "Excuse me?" I opened the ledger. It was no longer a blank book. It was a grid of data. "You are losing 34% of your milk to spoilage. You order it on Monday, but the slowest days are Tuesday and Wednesday. You could do a second, smaller order on Thursday and save, I estimate, $80 a week." She stared at my neat, color-coded columns. "And here," I said, turning the page to my hand-drawn diagram. "The prep station. If you move the high-use items, the cheese, the prep-sliced onions, the salsa, to this front shelf, and move the milk to the front of the refrigerator, you save the line cook approximately 25 seconds per burrito. During the 6 to 8 a.m. rush, that means you can produce an additional 12 burritos an hour. That is, potentially, $50 more in revenue a day." Tia Alvarez leaned over the counter and looked at my graphs. She looked at my estimates. She looked at me, this pale, quiet girl who had materialized out of the rain. She grunted, "You are a very strange girl." But the next morning, I saw her yelling at the prep cook to move the cheese. My next project was Ben Wyatt. Ben drove the diner's old delivery van. He was loud, chronically late, and perpetually cheerful. He delivered breakfast and lunch orders to a cluster of construction sites on the north side of town. He ran the same route, in the same order, every single day, and his route was chaos. I watched him leave one morning, and I pulled out one of the diner's cheap paper napkins. I sketched the city grid from memory. I marked Tia's diner and the 5 construction sites. Ben was driving in a scattershot pattern, crisscrossing his own path, wasting gas and time. "Ben," I said the next morning, holding out a new napkin. "You're late." "Always am, kid." He laughed, grabbing the bag of food. "You're late because your route is inefficient." He stopped. "My route is my route." "It's illogical," I said. I held up the napkin. I had drawn 2 maps. "This is your route now. It's a star pattern. You waste 22 minutes backtracking between Site 2 and Site 3. I pointed to the second drawing. "This is a loop. It's 6 minutes longer in total distance, but it follows the main arterial roads, avoids the school zones, and hits every site in a clean, logical progression. You will save, I estimate, at least 15 minutes, maybe 20. Ben looked at the napkin. He looked at me. "It's just a bunch of lines on a napkin." "It's a better system," I said. He sighed, snatched the napkin from my hand, and walked out. He came back that day 22 minutes earlier than usual. He didn't say anything to me. He just threw the wadded-up napkin on the counter and stared. The next morning, he walked in and came right to me. All right, GPS girl, where am I going today? It became our ritual. He'd bring me his list of orders, and I'd draw him the map. We optimized for school zones, for rush hour, for which site had the shortest lunch break. We cut Tia's fuel bill by almost 10%. One afternoon, Ben was drinking a soda at the counter, waiting for his last run. You know, my brother-in-law, he's a manager over at EverWest Freight. The big rigs, the ones that go across the country. I nodded, wiping down the counter. They pay people, real money, to do what you're doing on those napkins. They call it logistics. You're wasted here. Kid, you're the sharpest tool in this whole damn shed. He pulled a pen from his shirt and tore off a strip of register tape. His name is Tom Riker. He manages the night shift. Go see him. Tell him Ben Wyatt, the only driver in Denver who's never late, sent you. He handed me the flimsy piece of paper. It felt heavier than a paycheck. EverWest Freight was not a diner. It was a concrete solar system. It was a building so vast it seemed to bend the horizon. A fortress of loading bays and humming refrigeration units under a perpetual sodium light glare. It smelled of diesel exhaust, ozone, and wet cardboard. This was not a local map. This was the big map. I walked into the transport office, a small, stained room, tacked onto the side of the warehouse. I was 19 years old. I was wearing my best donated clothes. I had no resume. I had a folder containing my hand-drawn inventory ledgers from Alvarez's and a small, folded stack of routing napkins. Tom Riker looked like he had been carved from the same concrete as the building. He was in his 50s, his face a roadmap of exhaustion and cynicism. He looked at my portfolio and did not smile. Ben Wyatt sent me, I said. Ben Wyatt is an idiot, Riker grunted. You have no degree. You have no experience. I have this, I said, pushing the ledger forward. I cut Alvarez's food waste by 34% and their delivery time by 18%. He stared at me for a long, silent minute. I have one job, data entry, night shift. You sit in a cube and you type what the drivers write on their manifests into our terminal. It is the most boring job in this building. It pays $9 an hour. Can you type? I can learn, I said. You start tonight. The job was, in fact, mind-numbingly boring. I sat in a sea of identical gray cubicles under flickering fluorescent lights. The database software was ancient, a green and black DOS-based nightmare. My job was to take the driver's handwritten, coffee-stained logs and translate them into code. But to me, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was data, pure, unadulterated, raw data. I wasn't just typing numbers. I was seeing the lifeblood of the country. I saw truck weights, fuel consumption, driver hours, cargo codes, delivery windows. I saw the flow. The first thing I did in my new cubicle was take my plastic hospital bracelet out of my wallet. Address, undetermined. I taped it to the side of my bulky CRT monitor. It was my memory compass. My memory compass. A reminder. I was not just fast. I was perfect. My error rate was 0. I didn't just type the data. I learned the codes. I memorized the routes. Tom Riker would walk the floor, a cup of toxic-looking coffee in his hand. He stopped at my desk more and more often. You're fast, Rollins, he'd say. I was Rebecca Rollins now. I had put it on my application. The street name of the shelter. A clean break. Thank you, Mr. Riker. Speed is fine, but you're missing the point. He tapped my screen. You're just typing. You're not reading. You're not seeing the story. He picked up a manifest from my stack. This, Truck 401. Denver to Boise. Simple, right? I nodded. Wrong. This driver, Pete, he's got a bad back. He needs a cab with air ride suspension. This route, I-80 through Wyoming. It's October. That means ice, high wind warnings. And this cargo? It's medical-grade plasma. It can't be late, and it can't freeze. You type 401 Denboy. You're not seeing the story. He dropped the paper on my desk. Every route is a story, kid. Knowing when to turn, knowing when to hold 'em. That's the art. The rest is just data entry." He walked away, and my world cracked open. I stopped just entering data. I started reading the stories. I stayed late, off the clock. I taught myself the query language for the ancient database. I started cross-referencing manifests with weather reports. I correlated driver logs with maintenance records. A month later, a blizzard warning was issued for the entire state of Wyoming. A snow event. The system, automated and stupid, was still routing 6 trucks straight into it. The dispatchers, overworked and stressed, were just trying to clear their boards. I saw the story. 6 trucks, full of high-value cargo, were about to be stranded for at least 48 hours. I didn't ask permission. I opened a basic spreadsheet program. I built a matrix. I pulled the data. Truck numbers, cargo priority, driver hours of service, final destinations. I cross-referenced it with the storm's path and the road closure announcements. I built a new system. I rerouted 2 of the trucks, the high-priority medical and electronics cargo, south through Utah. It added 400 miles and 11 hours, but it avoided the closure. It was a guaranteed arrival. I put 2 other trucks, the low-priority cargo, canned goods and paper products, on mandatory hold in Cheyenne before they hit the storm. I consolidated the cargo of the last 2 trucks, which were both half empty, onto one, and sent the other driver home. I printed the single sheet of paper and walked into Tom Riker's office. "What?" he snapped, not looking up. "You're about to lose 6 assets," I said. "This is how you save them." I put the paper on his desk. He read it. He looked at the storm map on his wall. He looked back at my spreadsheet. He saw the cold, hard logic. He saw the story I was telling him. He picked up his radio. "Dispatch, listen up. I'm making a change." He read my entire plan, verbatim, into the radio. "Reroute 401 and 512 through Utah. Hold 220 and 309 in Cheyenne. Consolidate 112 and 104. Get 104's driver a hotel. Now." He looked at me. "Get out." The next day, he called me to his desk. The 6 trucks were safe. The cargo was moving. The storm had shut down I-80, just as predicted. "The bean counter's upstairs," he said. "Ran your numbers. Your little play saved this company an estimated $140,000. Your matrix. It cut the potential delay time on the high-priority freight by a full 12%. He opened his drawer and threw a new ID badge on the desk. It had my name on it. "You're not data entry anymore, Rollins. You're a junior project manager. You work on the main floor. With me. Your pay is doubled." He pointed to the main dispatch floor, a chaotic, loud room of ringing phones and shouting men. "Welcome to the art. Now get to work." I stood there, holding my new badge. I had a title. I had a salary. I went back to my dark cubicle. I untaped the plastic hospital bracelet from the monitor. I walked to my new desk, in the light, and I taped it right next to my new screen. I was good at my job. I loved it. I loved the flow, the data, the roar of the trucks. I loved fixing the broken routes. But I started to see other things. I saw the dispatchers give the high-mileage, high-pay routes to their friends. I saw them punish drivers they didn't like with bad trucks or low-paid deadhead runs. I saw women in the office get passed over for promotions in favor of men who were objectively less qualified. It was my father's house. It was the folding chair. I was fixing the systems for trucks. But the systems for people were just as broken. They were inefficient. They were unfair. I looked at my hospital bracelet. Address, undetermined. I pulled out a fresh notepad. I wrote a new note to myself, a new piece of code for my own life. Order is where survival flourishes. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was flourishing, and I realized my calling wasn't just to manage systems, it was to build new ones. I stayed at EverWest Freight for 1 more year. It was a long, brutal, necessary year. I was a junior project manager, earning a real salary, but I lived like a ghost. I kept my small, single room near the shelter. I ate at Tia's for cost, and I saved every single dollar I didn't use for bus fare. I saved, and I watched. Tom Riker, in his own gravel-voiced way, became a mentor. He taught me the big map, the federal trucking laws, the union contracts, the complex, invisible tapestry of interstate commerce. I absorbed all of it, but I couldn't unsee the other system, the human one. I watched a dispatcher give a high-pay, high-mileage run to his friend and stick a driver he disliked with a deadhead run, an empty trailer, no cargo, no pay, for 2 days as a punishment. I watched him do it with a smirk. It was the folding chair. It was the $25 book voucher. It was the entire, arbitrary, unfair system of my childhood, playing out with 40-ton trucks. I knew I had to build my own. I sketched the idea on the back of a freight manifest. A company that didn't just see the trucks, but the people. A company that understood that a demoralized driver was just as inefficient as a bad route. I needed a name that meant guidance, the one fixed point in the sky, the one travelers have used for centuries to orient themselves when they are lost in the chaos. The North Star, and the system, the logical, fair, data-driven foundation, a grid. North Star grid, orientation amidst chaos. I quit on a rainy Tuesday. My bank account, the first one I had ever opened, held exactly $3,200. I left a one-page manual on Tom Riker's desk, outlining a new process for his dispatch software that would save him an extra 4% on fuel. "You're a damn good logistician, Rollins," he grunted, not looking up. "Don't come crawling back when this blows up." "I won't," I said. My first headquarters was not an office. It was a mezzanine, a 400-square-foot loft above a 24-hour copy and print shop in a part of town that smelled like stale beer and exhaust. The rent was $300 a month, paid in cash. The floor vibrated constantly with the thump, thump, thump of the industrial presses below, and the air was thick with the chemical smell of toner and hot solvents. But it had a massive north-facing window that looked out over the city, and it had a high-speed internet port. The gas heater in the corner clanged and rattled, but it worked just enough to keep my hands from going numb. It was mine. I bought a used folding table and a metal chair, and on that table, I set up my new foundation. 3 objects. First, the plastic hospital bracelet. Address, undetermined. Second, the $20 bill. I had taken it to a small shop and had it mounted in the simplest, cheapest black frame. My inheritance. Third, a single sheet of paper, still warm from the printer downstairs. A test logo. A simple, clean, 4-pointed star. I had no clients. I had no degree. I had no reputation. I was a 20-year-old woman in a loft, with a pile of napkins from a diner and some spreadsheets from a trucking company. So I did the only thing I knew how. I worked. I went to the public library and made a list of every small business in Denver that had a physical product. Bakeries, microbreweries, local machine shops, florists. Then I started walking. My pitch was simple. "My name is Rebecca Rollins. I run North Star Grid. Your business is losing money. You don't know where. I do. Give me 1 week, free of charge. I will do a full operational audit. I will find your bottlenecks, your waste, your inefficiencies. If I can't find a way to save you money, you pay me nothing. You never see me again. If I do, you pay me 10% of what I save you in the first month." Most of them threw me out. "A one-woman consulting firm? You're a child." But some were desperate enough to say yes. My first client was a small brewery. I worked for 18 hours a day for a full week in their cold, damp warehouse. I sat on a keg, my laptop balanced on my knees. I diagnosed their entire bottling line, a jammed sensor that was causing a 12-second delay, which added up to 3 hours of lost production a day. I rebuilt their delivery routes, just like I had for Ben Wyatt. I presented my findings. A clear, data-driven report that proved I would save them $2,000 a month. The owner clapped me on the back, took my report, and said, "Thanks, kid. We'll take it from here." He never paid me. He never returned my calls. I sat in my cold mezzanine, staring at the $20 bill. Be practical, Rebecca. My father's voice. Practicality would be to give up, to go beg Tom Riker for my old job. I did neither. I went back to the brewery, unannounced. I had printed and professionally bound a full copy of my report at the shop downstairs, along with a laminated, one-page implementation guide for his staff. I handed it to the owner. "You didn't pay me," I said, my voice flat. "But I finish my jobs. Here is the how-to guide for your team. You're still losing money until you implement it." He was so stunned by the audacity. He wrote me a check for $200, right on the spot. It was a fraction of what he owed me, but it was a start, and it taught me a lesson. I had legal aid draw up my next contract, but my principle was set. I finished the job, no matter what. I created my slogan. I printed it on new business cards. North Star Grid. Fixing systems, elevating people. It wasn't just about the data. It was about the humanity. It was Tia's lesson. They pay to be remembered. It was Riker's lesson. Every route is a story. My job was to fix the system, but also to elevate the people who were trapped inside it. My first real paying client was Gold Leaf Bakery. It was a third-generation shop, beloved in its neighborhood, and weeks from bankruptcy. The owner, Lila Goldleaf, was a woman in her 60s with flour in her hair and terror in her eyes. "I'm losing my father's legacy," she wept, showing me her books. "We're throwing out almost 40% of our bread. 40%. But if I bake less, we sell out, and customers get angry. I don't know what to do." I didn't just look at her books. I spent 8 weeks there. I arrived at 3 a.m. with the bakers, my breath fogging in the cold. I stayed until 5 p.m. for the closing shift. The problem wasn't just the baking schedule. It was the people, the morning bakers, who loved their craft, hated the afternoon counter staff, who they thought were lazy. The counter staff thought the bakers were divas. Communication was a series of angry scribbled notes. Orders were lost. Resentment was high. The system was toxic. So I fixed it. I built them a simple, cloud-based order system. So all pre-orders were digitized. No more lost notes. I built a predictive inventory model based on their last 6 months of sales, cross-referenced with weather and local events. The baking list became a dynamic, data-driven document. Waste dropped from 40% to under 5% in 2 weeks. But the real fix? I used my first payment from Alara to buy a good coffee machine for the break room, and I implemented one new rule: a mandatory, paid, 10-minute meeting every day at the shift change. The head baker and the shift manager had to sit down, look each other in the eye, and talk about the day. I fixed the system, then I elevated the people. Lila Goldleaf paid my invoice in full, in cash. She hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. She became my biggest advocate. A freelance reporter for the Denver Business Journal was a regular at Goldleaf. He saw the change. The shelves were full. The staff was smiling. The sold-out sign was gone. He asked Alara what had happened. She pointed to me, sitting in the corner, my laptop plugged into the wall. The story was small, a half page in the local section, but the headline changed my life. From bus bench to dispatch desk, how one woman is fixing Denver's small businesses. My phone, the cheap burner phone I had duct taped to my desk, started to ring. I was making money, real money. I moved out of the shelter into a small, clean, one-bedroom apartment, but I went back to Haven Row House. I went to the director. "I want to teach," I said. Every Wednesday night, from 7 to 9 p.m., I ran a free workshop in the shelter's common room. I called it the Toolbox. I bought 5 used laptops with my own money and set them up. I wasn't teaching philosophy. I was teaching weapons. How to really use Excel. How to build a personal budget that worked. How to read a shift schedule. And how to build a shift schedule. How to manage inventory. I was giving them the keys. I was showing them, step by step, the path I had taken out. North Star Grid grew. The mezzanine was too small. The constant thump-thump of the printers was no longer charming. It was a bottleneck. I hired a moving van, one I routed myself to be 20% more efficient, and moved us into a 3,000-square-foot open-plan office in a converted warehouse district. We didn't buy cubicles. We painted entire walls with whiteboard paint. Within a week, those walls were covered in the beautiful, complex, colorful diagrams of our clients' problems, Kanban boards, flowcharts, process maps. I couldn't do it alone anymore. I hired my first 2 employees, not MBAs. I hired the line cook from Tia's, a man who could mentally manage 6 grill orders and the inventory at the same time. And I hired one of the night shift dispatchers from EverWest, a quiet woman who I knew was smarter than all her bosses. I paid them a real salary, a good one, more than I paid myself. There were weeks, in that first year, when a client was late on an invoice, that I lived on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches so I could make payroll. It was a non-negotiable. A system is only as strong as its most vulnerable part. We landed a big client, a regional hardware distributor. The contract was worth $30,000. I went on site myself for the initial audit. I stood on the warehouse floor, watching. The floor manager, a man with a clipboard and a sour face, was screaming at a young worker. The kid had used the wrong pallet jack. The manager called him an idiot. He called him stupid. He humiliated him in front of his entire team. The kid just stared at the floor, shaking. It was my father's house. It was the folding chair. It was the dispatcher with the smirk. I stopped the audit. I put my laptop in my bag. I went to the CEO's office. "I'm sorry," I said, "but North Star Grid cannot take this contract." He was baffled. "What, we're paying you a fortune?" "My services are contingent on a baseline of professional respect for your employees. The systems I build require it. Your floor manager is a liability to your entire operation. He creates inefficiency through fear." The CEO laughed. "He's a jerk, but he gets results. I can't just fire him." "I'm not asking you to," I said, walking to the door. "I'm firing you." I walked out. Losing that $30,000 contract was the best decision I ever made. The story got out. My 2 employees looked at me differently. They weren't just employees. They were a team. North Star Grid wasn't just a consulting firm. We were a standard. We didn't just fix systems. We elevated people. And if a client wasn't willing to elevate their own people, they didn't get to work with us. The company was thriving. We were 23 years old. And North Star Grid was no longer a scrappy startup. We were a force. We had just moved into our permanent headquarters, the entire 28th floor of the newest glass tower in downtown Denver. We were profitable. We had a staff of 45. My Wednesday night toolbox class at Haven Row House had been formalized into the North Star Grid Foundation, a fully funded program that offered logistics certifications and job placements to women transitioning out of the shelter system. I had built a world of perfect, clean, data-driven order, and then, on a Tuesday afternoon, my past blew a hole right through the middle of it. It arrived not as a dramatic confrontation, but as a quiet, digital threat, an email. It came to my personal address, not my public company one. The sender was anonymous, a string of garbled letters from an encrypted service. The subject line was just 2 words. "Remember Cedar Grove?" My blood didn't just run cold, it froze solid. The body of the email contained only a single, grainy, scanned attachment, a PDF. I opened it. It was a financial document, a student loan application. It was dated 5 years ago, just 2 months after I'd been kicked out. The application was for a supplemental aid package, a private loan. The applicant's name, typed neatly in the box, was Rebecca Brooke. My old name, the social security number was mine, the date of birth was mine. The listed address was my parents' house in Cedar Grove, Ohio. And at the bottom, on the signature line, was a forgery. It was a sloppy, unpracticed attempt to copy my signature, but it wasn't my hand. It was too looped, too hesitant. Beneath it, on the cosigner line, was my father's signature. Gareth Brooke. Sharp, precise, and angry. I felt the air leave the room. I was looking at fraud, identity theft. I stared at the name of the lending institution at the top of the form, Greenbrook College Aid. The name was vaguely familiar. I racked my brain. Where had I heard it? And then it hit me. My mother, Miriam, bragging to a neighbor years ago. Gareth found the most wonderful service, Greenbrook. They're handling all of Lena's financial aid applications. They just make everything so easy. This wasn't an application for me. It was an application using me. The implication was sickening. I pulled up my credit report, something I hadn't done in years, and there it was, a $5,000 student loan, opened 5 years ago, co-signed by Gareth Brooke. It had been paid off, in full, 2 years later. I didn't understand. Why? Why would they do this? They had kicked me out. I was gone. And then the cold, hard logic of it settled over me. Lena was going to an expensive private college, their golden child. They must have hit a ceiling on the financial aid they could get in her name. So they found a workaround. They had another daughter, one who wasn't attending college, one who was, for all intents and purposes, off the grid, a ghost identity, with a clean, unused social security number, perfect for a supplemental loan. They had used me as a shell. They had stolen my name to fund her future, the very future I had been sacrificed for. I felt a sudden, visceral wave of nausea. This was not a moment of quiet unfairness, like the folding chair. This was a crime. My first instinct was primal. Burn it. Burn them. Call the police. Call a lawyer. Expose them. I picked up my phone. My hand was shaking, not with fear, but with a pure, white-hot rage I had not allowed myself to feel in 5 years. I didn't call the police. I called my corporate counsel, the high-priced, shark-in-a-suit lawyer who handled North Star's contracts. "David," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "I am sending you a document. I need you to tell me, hypothetically, what my options are." I forwarded the email. He called me back in less than 5 minutes. "Rebecca," he said, and his usual breezy tone was gone. "This is not hypothetical. This is wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. The statute of limitations hasn't run out. You could ruin them. We can have an investigator on this by tomorrow. We can trace the source of the anonymous email. We can subpoena the records from Greenbrook. We can—" "Quietly, David," I said, cutting him off. I was staring at the $20 bill in its frame on my shelf. "I don't want noise. I want data. I want you to gather every piece of evidence, find the bank records, find the original application, find the disbursement details, find out where the money went. Do it all through back channels. No one, and I mean no one, finds out we are looking. Understood?" "Understood, Rebecca," he said. "Consider it in a black box." I hung up. I stood in my glass office, 28 floors above the city, and I felt like I was right back on that metal bench at the bus station. The cold, the rage, the absolute, suffocating unfairness of it all. I was staring out the window, trying to force the logic back into my head, when Sarah, my head of HR, knocked on my open door. "Rebecca, I've got a candidate file I'd really like your eyes on. She's perfect, on paper. At least." I turned, my face a mask of stone. "Put it on my desk." She did, her brow furrowed at my tone. "She's a rock star from Greenway Logistics, senior ops manager. We lost her in the first round last year, but she just got laid off in their big restructuring. It's a huge opportunity for us." I nodded, not looking at her. "Thank you. Sarah, I'll review it." She left, closing the door softly. I sat down. I looked at the file on my desk, and then I looked at the email on my screen. The loan, the fraud. I opened the file. The resume was perfect. Rockview State University, glowing recommendations, 2 years as a team lead. And the name at the top, Lena Brooke. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. In the same 30-minute span, my past had arrived in 2 forms, a legal bomb and a job application. My sister, the beneficiary of the fraud, was now asking me for a job. I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound that echoed in the quiet office. The system wasn't just broken, it was a dark, cosmic joke. My first human thought? No. Burn the application. Tell Sarah she's not a fit. She will never set foot in this building. She is the living embodiment of the system that threw me away. She is the reason. No. Then I looked at my slogan, painted on the wall of our central operations hub, visible from my office. Fixing systems, elevating people. I was Rebecca Rollins. I was the woman who had fired a $30,000 client for disrespecting an employee. I was the woman who had built a company on the bedrock of radical, data-driven objectivity. If I denied her application because of who she was, because of what our parents did, what did that make me? It made me them. It made me the dispatcher with the smirk. It made me the father who chose one child over the other. It made me the arbiter of an arbitrary, emotional, and unfair system. I would be no better than the people who sat at that 4-person dinner table and left me on a folding chair. I would not give them that power. I would not let them turn me into them. "Sarah," I called out, my voice sharp. She reappeared, looking worried. "Yes?" "Bring her in," I said. "Put her through the full process. Blind review, no special treatment." "You know her?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide. "She's my sister," I said, the word tasting like ash, "which is why you and the hiring committee will be handling her file. I will be recusing myself from the final decision, but I will design the test." A slow smile spread across Sarah's face. She understood. "Understood. Rebecca, a blind, merit-based review. I'll schedule her." After she left, I picked up the phone again. I dialed a number I knew by heart, a number for a small, independent trucking dispatcher in Ohio. A gravelly voice answered. "Yeah? Mr. Keegan?" A pause. "Who's this?" "It's Rebecca, the kid from the bus station, from Cedar Grove, 5 years ago." A longer pause, a huff. "Rollins, the hotshot in Denver, saw that article. Good for you. You're not holding up the system anymore. You're running it." "I have a problem. Mr. Keegan, a systems problem." "Always do," he grunted. I told him everything, the email, the loan, the application. I told him about my rage and my decision to let her interview. He was silent for a long time. I could hear the crackle of his dispatch radio in the background. "So you're gonna crucify her in the interview, right? Make her pay." "No," I said. "I'm going to recuse myself. I'm going to let the process work. I'm going to be objective. I'm going to be fair." He laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "You're a real piece of work. Rollins, you think fair is going to fix this? You think objective is going to heal that wound? That wound, kid, it's steering you, whether you like it or not." "What do I do?" I whispered. "You're asking the wrong question. You think this is about forgiveness. It's not. Forgiveness is for later. Forgetting is never. This is about one thing. You gonna let that wound steer the truck? Or are you gonna put your hands on the wheel?" He sighed. "You built your whole company on your wound. That's your superpower, kid. It's why you see the broken crap no one else does. Don't pretend it's not there. Use it. You built the system. You built the test. Let the test do its job. Let her pass, or let her fail. Based on the data. That's it. That's you not letting them steer." He hung up. I sat back. He was right. Don't let the wound steer. I would not be objective despite my past. I would use my past to forge the perfect, objective tool. I opened my laptop. I wasn't just designing an interview. I was designing a crucible. I spent the next 2 days coding a custom simulation for the final field test. I didn't just want to see if Lena was competent. I wanted to see her ethics. I wanted to see her choices under pressure. I built data traps. I created ghost manifests, inventory counts that were deliberately wrong. I wrote a script for a personnel conflict, a scenario where a longtime, loyal employee was being bullied by a new hire who was a friend of the boss. I designed the test to measure one thing. Would she choose the easy political answer, or would she choose the hard, data-driven, fair answer, even if it cost her? It was the test of the folding chair. While I built the test, I built a policy. I called it the North Star Grid Fair Hiring Codex. It was a one-page document. It stated, in clear, unmistakable language, that all hiring decisions would be made by a committee. It explicitly banned any executive, including the CEO, from having a final, unilateral say. It codified our entire hiring process, from blind resume reviews to the field test. I published it to the entire company. As of today, my memo read, this is law. My final act was to call David, my lawyer. David, the fraud investigation. I have a new plan for the money, when you find it. I drafted a new charter for my foundation. We were opening a new fund. I called it the Real Chairs Fund. Its purpose was simple: to provide micro-grants and scholarships for women and young people who had been systemically denied opportunities, who had been told they were impractical. My parents had stolen $5,000 from my name. I was going to turn it into a $50,000 seed fund, and I was going to use it to elevate every person I could find who had been left in the cold. I did not speak to the press. I did not tell my team about the email. I did not tell them who Lena Brooke really was, only that I was recusing myself due to a personal conflict. I put my hands on the wheel. I had built the system. I had set the test. Now, it was time to let her walk into it. The conference room was silent, pressurized. I sat at the head of the table, not as the founder, but as the lead interviewer. It was a role defined by our new Fair Hiring Codex. Beside me sat Sarah, my head of HR, and Ben Wyatt, who I had poached from Tia's diner years ago and who was now my director of ground operations. We were the hiring committee. I had one vote, same as them. The door opened with its hydraulic sigh. Lena Brooke walked in. She was exactly as I remembered from the first screen, but the confidence was sharper. She wore an expensive, dark gray suit. She was the perfect image of a rising corporate star. She did not, for a second, recognize me. To her, I was just a woman, younger than her, who inexplicably held the power. She smiled, a bright, practiced expression. Ms. Rollins, thank you for your time, and Mr. Wyatt, Sarah, I'm excited to be here. I did not smile back. Please, sit down, Ms. Brooke. I let the silence stretch. The small red light of the digital recorder on the table, the only spot of color. Ben and Sarah knew the process. I would lead the scenario tests. We're not interested in your resume, I began, my voice flat, echoing slightly in the glass room. We are interested in your process. I am going to give you a scenario. You are a senior manager. You inherit a high-performing team. You discover that a previous manager routinely passed over a highly competent, high-output employee for promotion, citing vague reasons like not a team player or not fitting the culture. You realize this employee is the only one on the team who didn't attend the same university as the rest of the group. The team's morale is low, and they see the favoritism clearly. How do you handle this? This was the test, not about logistics, about the system of people. Lena didn't hesitate. She was good. She leaned forward, her expression shifting to one of practiced, serious integrity. That's a textbook case of systemic bias, and it's poison to an operation. Fairness is the bedrock of efficiency. You can't have a high-output team if they believe the rules are arbitrary. She was using all the right words. My first step, she continued, would be to separate emotion from data. I'd conduct a blind audit of the team's performance metrics for the last 2 quarters. I'd quantify the overlooked employees' output, their error rates, their project completion times. I'd create a data-driven case for their performance. And then, I asked, my face impassive. Then, I'd address it head-on. I'd schedule a meeting with my own superior, present the data, and make the case for the promotion based on pure, undeniable merit. I would also implement a new, transparent rubric for promotions moving forward. It's crucial to show the entire team that the system is now fair. Favoritism, even if it's based on something as simple as being a familiar face, is just inefficiency in a different suit. It has to be rooted out. Her answer was perfect. It was the North Star grid answer. It was the answer I would have given. And as she finished, her gaze, which had been locked on mine, drifted. It moved past my shoulder, to the steel shelf behind me. It scanned the industry awards, the model truck, and then it stopped. It stopped on the simple black frame holding the faded, creased $20 bill. I watched her face. The corporate polish didn't just crack, it shattered. For a fraction of a second, the confident interviewee was gone, replaced by something else, a flicker of profound, visceral confusion, a shadow of a memory. Her mouth remained in the shape of a professional smile, but her eyes were wide, suddenly uncomprehending. She was trying to solve an equation that was missing all its variables. Why would a CEO frame $20? Her voice, which had been so strong, faltered. It's about making sure She lost her train of thought completely. She was staring at the frame. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the air system. Ben and Sarah looked down at their notes, giving her a moment. I did not. I stared right at her. I waited. She finally blinked, tearing her eyes away from the frame, her face flushing a deep, painful red. I apologize. I lost my place. As I was saying, I held up a hand, a quiet, definitive gesture that cut her off. It's an important reminder. Ms. Brooke, I said, my voice quiet, but so cold it seemed to drop the temperature in the room. She looked at me, confused. I'm sorry? I motioned with my head toward the shelf she had been staring at. Here at North Star Grid, we are very particular about our environment. We believe in our systems. We believe that everyone who earns a spot here has earned it. You should know, Ms. Brooke, here, all seats are real seats. There are no folding chairs. Ben Wyatt's head snapped up. He shot me a look, a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. He knew my story, the sanitized version of it. He had never heard me use that phrase before. Lena just looked blank. The words meant nothing to her. They were just a strange, nonsensical statement from a CEO, and yet, the color drained from her face. She knew, on some primal level, that she had just been struck. I stood up. That concludes the behavioral portion. We will now move to the technical assessment. The tension broke. Sarah stood, her face professional. Ms. Brooke, if you'll follow me, we have an assessment room prepared for you. You will have 2 hours to complete a logistics redesign challenge. Your goal is to re-architect our entire Denver Metro delivery network based on a new client's product load. You will be provided with a full data set. I walked with them. We didn't just put her in a room. We put her in a glass-walled cube in the center of our main operations floor. It was a fishbowl. My entire team could see her. This was part of the test. Could you perform under pressure, in full view? I stood outside, on the operations floor, watching her through the glass. She was given a high-powered terminal. She logged in. The test began. She was impressive. She didn't panic. She immediately opened the spreadsheet, which contained over 50,000 lines of data. Her fingers flew. She wasn't just looking. She was building pivot tables, running queries, filtering. She understood data structures. She was competent. This was not a bluff. She had the skills. But I had built a trap. Buried in the data, at line 38,005, was a bad batch. It was a series of 10 entries that looked like corrupted data or a simple input error. The delivery times were impossible. The load weights were nonsensical. 99 out of 100 candidates would clean this data. They would delete those 10 lines, treating them as outliers, and build their new network based on the remaining clean data. That was the wrong answer. Those 10 lines were not an error. They were a symptom. They were a digital fingerprint of a critical flaw in the intake system, a flaw I had coded myself. The correct answer was not to delete them, but to isolate them, flag them, and build a contingency plan around them, identifying them as a primary system failure that needed to be addressed before the new network could be trusted. I watched her. 1 hour and 30 minutes in. Her new route map was on one screen, and it was good. It was efficient. And then I saw her mouse stop. She had found the bad batch. She hovered over the lines. She filtered for them. She stared at them. I could see the wheels turning. Is this a mistake, or is this the test? She ran a query. She saw the pattern. She took a deep breath. She didn't delete the lines. She opened a new tab. She labeled it Critical System Failure, Data Intake. She copied the bad batch over. Then she went back to her main design and added a new branch to her flowchart, a bright red box. Hold all shipments pending audit of intake error. See tab 2. She had found it. She had passed. I turned away from the glass. Ben was beside me, holding a tablet with his own notes. She's damn good, Rebecca, he said quietly. I mean, really good. She is, I said. My voice was neutral. I went back to my office, the glass fortress, and I sat down. I wrote my official assessment for the committee. It was 2 lines. 1. Technically proficient, high-level data comprehension, and a strong instinct for systemic flaws. 2. Lacks emotional transparency. All behavioral answers are perfectly polished. Motives unclear. The interview ended. I watched from my office as Sarah and Ben concluded with her, their faces unreadable. Lena gathered her things. That confident smile locked back in place, and walked to the elevator. The doors sighed shut. She was gone. My office was silent again. The adrenaline from the confrontation drained away, leaving that familiar, cold clarity. I had done it. I had put my wound, my past, and my sister through my system, and the system had held. I had been fair. My assistant, Chloe, knocked and entered. She was holding a single, stiff 9x12 envelope. This just came for you. Ms. Rollins, certified mail, signature required. I took it. It was from a national bank, the legal department. It was not from my lawyer. David, this was a direct response. I slid my letter opener under the heavy paper. Inside was a single, dense page of legal text. It was a formal notice. The internal investigation, prompted by my lawyer's inquiries into the Greenbrook College aid loan, was complete. They had cross-referenced the signature. They had confirmed the fraudulent nature of the application. But they couldn't close the file. Due to the co-signature of Gareth Brooke, the letter read, and the subsequent full repayment of the loan, our fraud department requires a formal, in-person affidavit from the primary applicant, Ms. Rebecca Brooke, to formally contest the validity of the loan and press charges. Without this attestation, our file will be closed. I read the line again. Requires a formal, in-person affidavit. They needed me. They needed Rebecca Brooke to walk into a bank and sign a paper that would send her father to jail. The cold, clear logic I had cultivated for 5 years evaporated. In its place, that old familiar wave rose up, the blind, hot rage of the 18-year-old girl on the metal bench, the girl in the rain, the girl who had been erased, then used as a ghost. The rage was so total, so absolute. It made my hands shake. They wanted me to be practical. I would show them practical. I would sign the paper. I would burn them to the ground. I stood up, the letter crushing in my fist. I looked out the window. The snow on the mountains was sharp and white. I looked at the city below, the grid of streets, the flow of traffic, the order. I looked at my desk, at the glowing North Star grid logo on my screen, at the clear, codified laws of my company. Don't let the wound steer the truck. Keegan's voice. I unclenched my fist, smoothing the letter. The rage was still there. It was a furnace, but it was my furnace. I was in control of it. This was not a decision to be made in anger. This was a legal matter. This was a variable in a much larger equation. I would not let them turn me into a blunt instrument of my own anger. I had built a system of process and law. I would anchor myself in it. My next move would not be emotional. It would be tactical. The bank's letter was heavy in one hand, in the other. My phone lit up with a call from David, my corporate counsel. "Rebecca," he said, his voice stripped of its usual ease. "The trace on the anonymous email is complete. We have the source." "And?" I asked, my eyes fixed on the bank's logo. "The IP address is static, residential, registered to a home internet account in Cedar Grove, Ohio. The account holder is Gareth Brooke. your father. He sent you the proof of his own fraud." I said nothing. The logic was staggering. Why confess? Guilt? A cry for help? A desire to self-destruct? "It doesn't matter why. Rebecca." David continued, as if hearing my thoughts. "What matters is we have him. The email is a confession. The bank letter is the weapon. You have all the leverage. You can end this right now." As he spoke, my assistant, Chloe, appeared at my open door, her face pale. "Rebecca, your main line. I have a personal call on hold. A woman named Miriam. She's crying, hysterically." "Voicemail," I said, my voice flat. "I'll call you back. David." I hung up and watched the small red light on my desk phone blink. I pressed the speaker button. Her voice, a thin, reedy sound I hadn't heard in 5 years, filled the silent, multi-million-dollar office. "Rebecca? Oh, God. Rebecca, is that really your company? Your father. I don't know what he did. He's a mess. The bank called. They're talking about fraud. Rebecca, please, it's your mother. You have to call us. Please, Lena had an interview in Denver. Can you imagine? What a coincidence. Rebecca, please call home." The message cut off. The light immediately began to blink again. A new message. This time, it was his voice, Gareth, the man who had quantified my existence down to a $20 bill. He wasn't the detached auditor. He was whimpering. Rebecca, I'm sorry. I didn't mean. It was for Lena. It was all for her. We paid it back. We paid every cent back. It's completed. It's done. You can't. Miriam said you have a big company. You're successful. You don't need to do this. It was just a practical decision." Click. He had confessed twice. The crisis was no longer a quiet, smoldering legal matter. It was a live fire, and it was breaching containment. My first priority was the company. My advisory board was meeting in 1 hour. I walked into the boardroom, my spine straight, my face a mask of cold resolve. "Good afternoon," I said, taking my seat. "Before we review the quarterly numbers, I have a mandatory disclosure. I am flagging a significant conflict of interest regarding a senior candidate, Lena Brooke." The air in the room chilled. I gave them the data, not the drama. "Ms. Brooke is my estranged elder sister. Our separation, 5 years ago, was under extreme and negative personal circumstances. Furthermore, I am currently engaged in a legal discovery process concerning my family of origin. This process could, potentially, result in criminal charges being filed against my parents. Richard Hemlock, my lead investor and a man who despised public risk, set his coffee cup down. Rebecca, explain the reputational liability. Criminal charges? You are the face of this brand. The bus bench to dispatch desk narrative is our core asset. If this blows up, if the press gets a hold of CEO Sue's family, it could be catastrophic. That is the risk, I confirmed, meeting his gaze. Which is why, as of yesterday, I have formally and legally recused myself from all hiring decisions related to Ms. Brooke. The decision now rests solely with the Independent Hiring Committee. As defined by our new internal codex, I will not have a vote. I will not have a veto. And this legal matter? Hemlock pressed. Make it go away. I will handle the legal matter, I said, my tone final. It will be resolved. I am informing the board because our bylaws require transparency. I am managing the conflict by adhering radically to our own system. The committee's decision will be final. Now, let's look at the projections. They were furious, but I had insulated the company. The system would hold. My next act was to widen that insulation. I called my head of marketing. I want the North Star Grid Fair Hiring Codex, the entire document, published on the About Us section of our main website. I want it live in 1 hour. The whole thing, Rebecca? He asked. Even the CEO recusal clause? Especially that, I said. Our process is our product. Let the world see it. That night was Wednesday, my night to teach the toolbox class at Haven Row House. I arrived to find the common room full. The 5 used laptops I had donated whirring. I scrapped my lesson on inventory management. Tonight, I said, plugging in the projector, we're not just talking about Excel. We're talking about transparency. We're talking about how you build a system that protects you when the people in charge are biased. For 2 hours, I didn't think about my family. I just taught. I walked them through building a fair, data-driven shift schedule, one that used seniority and performance metrics, not a manager's favoritism. To assign high-pay or low-pay shifts, I was giving them armor. A good system, I concluded, doesn't just create efficiency, it creates proof. It is your defense. Use it. I felt centered. I had taken the raw, chaotic energy of the crisis and forged it into a public policy and a practical lesson. I was in control of the narrative. As I got to my car, my phone buzzed. It was Mark, the reporter from the Denver Business Journal, who had written the first story about me. "Rebecca, this is gold," he said, his voice fast. "I see you published your hiring codex. It's revolutionary. I'm running a story. But I also just got a very juicy anonymous tip. Something about a new candidate, Alina Brooke, being your sister, and that there's family trouble. Can you comment on the rumor that you're hiring your own sister?" The attack, I had been waiting for it. "Mark," I said, my voice pleasant, but with a core of steel. "I am thrilled you're covering the codex. It's the new standard for fair hiring, and I'm happy to give you an exclusive on why I designed it, but my family is not, and will never be, a topic of discussion. It is irrelevant to the business. The codex exists precisely so that personal matters remain personal. Now, do you want the exclusive on the policy or not?" He backed down, sensing the wall. "The policy? Yes. Tomorrow at 10. I hung up. I had held the line. The system was the wall. I got home to my dark, sterile apartment. The adrenaline of the day was fading, leaving a cold exhaustion. There was one last piece of data, one last breach. An email, not to my North Star account, to the private, personal address the anonymous tip had come to, an address I hadn't used in 5 years. The sender was Lina Brooke. My heart, which had been a disciplined, steady machine all day, skipped a beat. She had never had this address. She must have gotten it from them. The subject line was 2 words. "Is it you?" I opened it. I saw the way you looked at me in the interview. I saw the $20 bill in the frame. I didn't understand, but now, our parents called me. They're falling apart. They're hysterical, crying, talking about a loan and a bank and fraud. They said your name. Are you Rebecca? If you are Rebecca, I don't know what I would say. I need to know. The mask I had worn for the board, for my class, for the press, it finally cracked. This wasn't the candidate. This wasn't the CEO. This was me, and this was Lina, the golden child, the one who had stood silently by as they locked the door. She was asking me a question. I could delete it. I could forward it to HR and have her disqualified for breaking interview protocol. That would be the system answer. But it would be the answer of a coward. It would be my father's answer. Be practical. Don't make a scene. I would be clear. I would set the boundary. I would give her one, and only one. True answer. My fingers moved across the keys. At North Star Grid. Everyone starts from their present. Your field test is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Be ready. I hit send. I shut my laptop. The move was hers. The system was ready. My personal phone rang. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A new message. It wasn't them. It was the bank. The legal department. "Ms. Brooke, this is just a confirmation call. We've received the final documentation on our end regarding the completed status of the loan you contested. As our letter stated, we simply need your attestation to proceed with charges against the cosigner. We'll await your scheduling call. Completed, paid in full, They had stolen my name, used it, and then tidied up afterward, as if it were just a minor ledger correction. I looked at the phone. I had the power to sign a single paper and send Gareth to prison, to destroy Miriam's social standing, to detonate Lena's entire world, right before her final test. The rage was there. It was a cold, satisfying weight. Do it. It's justice. It's the consequence. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I thought of Mr. Keegan. Are you going to let the wound steer the truck? No. My purpose was not revenge. My purpose was not to be the instrument of their destruction. My purpose was to fix what was broken. I whispered to the empty room, "Fix the system. Don't retaliate." I would not call the bank. Not yet. I would not act on the rage of the past. I would act on the data of the present. And the most critical piece of data was not yet in. It was Lena. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. The field test would tell me, once and for all, who she really was when the system broke. And then, I would decide. The floor of the Blue Mesa Outdoors warehouse was a different world. It was not a glass-walled conference room. It was a cavern of noise, concrete, and the smell of cardboard and forklift exhaust. This was not a simulation. This was a live-fire operational test, a core part of the North Star Grid hiring process. And it was my final test for Lena. This was one of our key clients, and they had agreed to let us use their active floor for our final stage candidates. I was not the CEO. I was on the mezzanine catwalk, high above the floor, dressed in a black North Star Grid polo and cargo pants. I was just another ops manager, watching. Ben Wyatt stood beside me, a tablet in his hand, his eyes scanning the chaos below. "She's here," he said, nodding toward the main entrance. Lena walked in. She was wildly out of place. She had traded her suit for business casual, which on a warehouse floor made her look like a tourist. She looked nervous, but focused. The floor foreman, Mike, a man who was in on the test, met her, handed her a hard hat, a high-visibility vest, and a clipboard. "Welcome to the show, Ms. Brooke. We've got a situation." And the test began. "It's a cascade failure," Mike said, his voice a perfect facsimile of a man on the edge of panic. "I've got a priority truck, freeze-dried food and high-end climbing gear for the Vail retail launch, stuck in a snowslide up on Loveland Pass, ETA, unknown. It could be 2 hours. It could be 2 days. The client is screaming." He pointed to the bank of dark monitors on the wall. "To make it worse, the entire WMS just crashed. The warehouse management system is offline. We're blind. We're back to paper manifests. And," he threw a stack of papers on the desk, "I'm short-staffed. 3 of my best morning shift packers called out sick. The floor is yours, Ms. Brooke. Fix it." This was the crucible I had designed. The truck was a logistics problem. The WMS crash was a systems problem. The short staffing was a resource problem. From the catwalk, I watched her. She stood still for just a second. The noise of the forklifts and conveyor belts washing over her. I saw her close her eyes, take one deep breath, and then she opened them. The polished interviewee was gone. She was all business. "Where are my paper manifests for the outbound trucks?" she snapped. Mike pointed. "And who's my team?" Mike pointed to 3 young warehouse workers who were standing by, waiting for direction. One of them was Leo, a smart, ambitious kid I had been mentoring. Lena grabbed the manifests. She didn't try to fix the WMS. She didn't panic about the truck. She triaged. "What's perishable?" she demanded, scanning the pages. "The food," Leo said. "It's got a close-dated expiration. The Vail store needs it for a promo this weekend." "Right," Lena said. "We're not shelving it. It's a bottleneck. We're setting up a manual cross-dock. Right here on Staging Bay 3, I want the inbound truck, whenever it gets here, to be unloaded directly to a new staging area. We'll sort it, relabel it by hand, and load it directly onto the outbound local delivery vans. We bypass the system entirely. You 3, she pointed to her team. Start clearing the bay, now." Ben Wyatt whistled, low. She's fast. That's the right call. She's creating a new, temporary system. Smart. But that was only part one of the test. As her small team began to hustle, moving pallets, Leo, who had been prepped by HR, started the second phase. He accidentally dropped a box, and when Lena came over, he let his frustration show. "This is pointless," he grumbled, loud enough for her to hear. Lena stopped. She was on a clock. The simulation was designed to pressure her. "What's pointless, Leo?" "This busting my ass. It doesn't matter how fast I go, or how good my numbers are. I'll still get screwed on the schedule. We all will." This was the distraction. This was the human problem. This, right here, was the folding chair. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the railing. Lena looked at the bay her team was clearing. She looked at the clock on the wall. She was wasting time, and then she turned, giving Leo her full attention. "What do you mean? Screwed on the schedule?" Leo gestured, his voice bitter. "Them," he said, pointing to a group of 4 workers at the main packing station. They were laughing, working at a relaxed pace. "Packing 4, that's Mike's crew, his fishing buddies. They get the golden shifts, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, no weekends, ever. The rest of us? We get the random schedule, mandatory doubles, weekend nights. My UPH, my units per hour, is 30% higher than those guys. I've got the printouts to prove it, but I'm working Saturday night, again." I watched Lena. This was the moment of choice. She could, and probably should by the test's standards, tell him to focus on the task, to file a complaint with HR later. Her job was to fix the truck, not the company's internal politics. She looked at Leo's face, angry and resigned. She looked at the laughing crew at Packing 4. She looked at the foreman, Mike, who was watching her, his arms crossed, a smirk on his face. She made her choice. "Keep clearing the bay," she told Leo, "and tell the team I'll be right back." She walked, fast, not to the foreman, but to the massive, grease-stained whiteboard in the center of the floor, the one used for announcements. She grabbed a red marker. Mike intercepted her, his smirk gone, replaced by a look of territorial anger. "What do you think you're doing, lady? Your problem is with that truck." "Your problem," Lena shot back, not even looking at him, "is that your system is broken, your WMS is down, so you have no data, and your team's morale is shot, so you have no trust. We're going to fix both, right now." She drew a massive grid on the board. "This is our new WMS. For today." She drew columns: employee, shift, units per hour, UPH, projected, actual. "We're going to post everyone's UPH, updated hourly, right here," she declared. Her voice was loud. It was carrying. People were stopping to look. "The team with the highest UPH on the floor gets first choice of shifts for next week, and they get the bonus for getting this Vail shipment out." Mike's face went red. "You can't do that. I set the schedule. My guys are my best guys. We don't have time for this game." "If they're your best," Lena said, her voice like ice, "then the data will prove it. But I'm looking at a critical, perishable shipment. I'm not putting my trust in your guys. I'm putting it in the data. I need the fastest packers on my cross-dock team, and this board will tell me who they are. We're building a transparent metric, starting now." The foreman was about to explode. He was a second from kicking her off the floor. This was my moment. "She is absolutely right, Mike." My voice, amplified by the small PA on the mezzanine, cut through the warehouse. The entire floor went silent. Every worker looked up. I walked down the metal stairs, Ben right behind me. I walked past Lena, past Mike, and stood in front of the whiteboard. I looked at the 100+ employees who were now gathered. "My name is Rebecca Rollins. I'm the CEO of North Star Grid. We're your new logistics partner. And Ms. Brooke is correct. Your system is broken." I turned to Mike. "We've been auditing your WMS data for a month, in preparation for our system integration. The WMS wasn't the only thing that was broken." I nodded to Ben. He plugged his tablet into a large monitor on the wall, one that usually showed safety videos. A massive spreadsheet lit up the screen. It was a color-coded performance review of the entire warehouse. "This," I said, my voice cold and clear, "is your data, and this," I pointed to a column, "is your shift schedule, the names you see highlighted in red." I pointed to Mike's crew at Packing 4. "Have an average units per hour rate that is 20% lower than the floor average." A gasp went up from the crowd. "The names in green," I continued, pointing to Leo's name and a dozen others, "are in the top 10% for productivity, and yet the red group has received 100% of the preferred Monday to Friday day shifts for the last 6 months. The green group has been assigned 92% of the mandatory weekend and night shifts." The silence was a bomb. I had just pulled the pin. Leo was staring at the screen, his face a mask of pure, stunned vindication. Mike, the foreman, was white as a sheet. He looked like he was going to be sick. I turned and stepped back, ceding the floor to Lena. "Your proposal, Ms. Brooke?" Lena stood tall. She looked exhausted. Her hair was a mess. There was a smudge of grease on her face, but her eyes were on fire. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the crew. "My name is Lena Brooke. I'm the acting operations manager. The old system is gone. This," she slammed her hand on the whiteboard, "is the new one. We're building a transparent metric board, and it's starting today. Because fairness isn't about who gets what, it's about who earns what." For a second, silence. Then, from the back, one of the green team members started to clap. It was a slow, defiant sound. Then Leo joined in. And then the entire floor, save for the 4 men at Packing 4, erupted in applause. I watched Lena. She didn't smile. She just picked up the red marker. "All right," she yelled over the noise. "I need the top 4 packers from that board. You're with me. Let's go save that truck." I turned and walked back up to the mezzanine. We watched for another hour. Lena didn't just manage. She led. She had the data. She had the trust. And she ran that floor like a machine. When the simulated truck finally arrived, her team, the right team, cleared it in record time. Back in the glass-walled tower, the hiring committee reconvened. Sarah, Ben, and me. Ben spoke first. She didn't just pass the test. Rebecca, she rewrote it. She faced a systems, logistics, and a personnel crisis at the same time. She didn't just solve the technical problem. She diagnosed and confronted the core human failure. I've never seen anything like it. Sarah nodded, typing on her laptop. Official assessment. Demonstrates exceptional structural courage. Did not avoid conflict, but used data as a tool to resolve it. She didn't just optimize the system. She made it fair. That is our brand. I was silent, looking at the $20 bill on my shelf. I had designed a test to see if she was competent. I had gotten an answer to a much more important question. I had seen who she was under pressure. She wasn't our mother, obsessed with appearances. She wasn't our father, hiding behind practicality. She was a systems builder. "I agree," I said, my voice quiet. "She has the skills." Sarah looked up. "Then the committee is in consensus. The candidate is qualified, recommending a conditional offer of 90 days, with a clear KPI review. She'll report to Ben." The system had worked. The process was clean. The data was in. The hiring committee's decision was unanimous. Sarah, Ben, and I sat in the glass-walled conference room, the energy from the field test still palpable. "It's settled then," Sarah said, making the final notation on her tablet. "The committee formally recommends a 90-day conditional offer for the position of Senior Operations Manager to candidate Lena Brooke. She will report directly to Ben, with clear key performance indicators to be reviewed at the 30, 60, and 90-day marks." Ben nodded, a look of grim respect on his face. "She's earned it. She's got the right kind of courage for this. She sees the system." I gave a single, curt nod. "The system has spoken. Send her the offer." The process was clean. The data was in. My personal conflict had been insulated from the company's decision. I had held the line. I returned to my office. The feeling was not triumph. It was the quiet, cold satisfaction of a complex piece of code finally compiling without errors. I had built a system that was strong enough to withstand even my own past. And then my laptop chimed. An email from David, my corporate counsel. The subject line was 2 words, the signature. I opened it. David had forwarded a scanned document from the bank's forensics department. It was the original loan application, the one I had seen before, but this time it was annotated. Rebecca. David's email read, "The bank's document analysis is complete. We were operating on the assumption that Gareth forged your signature, as he was the co-signer and the one who sent the confession email. We were wrong." I zoomed in on the scan. There was a red box around the forged Rebecca Brooks signature and another around Miriam's signature from a separate document. "Their analysis is definitive," David wrote. The stroke patterns, the pressure, the subtle biometrics of the handwriting. The forgery was not executed by Gareth Brooke. It was executed by Miriam Brooke. Your father co-signed, but your mother is the one who physically signed your name. I stared at the screen. The blood drained from my face, leaving a prickling, icy cold. It was Miriam, who had pressed the $20 bill into my hand. Miriam, who had whispered, "Be quiet about it." Miriam, who had cried about Lena's future. She was the one who had held the pen. She was the one who had actively, physically, stolen my identity. Gareth was just the practical co-signer, but Miriam, she was the architect. The rage that I had so carefully contained, the furnace I thought I was controlling, exploded. It was a white, blinding nova. Before I could even process the information, my desk phone buzzed. Chloe, my assistant. "Rebecca, I am so sorry to bother you, but there are 2 individuals in the lobby, a Mr. and Mrs. Brooke. They are hysterical. They say they are your parents. They are demanding to see you. The lobby is filling with people. They are causing a scene. They were here." The chaotic, emotional, dysfunctional system of my past was physically breaching the walls of the clean, orderly world I had built. I stood up. My hands were perfectly, terrifyingly steady. "Chloe," I said, my voice so cold it surprised me. "Escort Mr. and Mrs. Brooke to conference room B, the small one, not the main one. Then, call David, our legal counsel, and Sarah, our head of HR. Tell them I require their presence in that room in 2 minutes. I will not be meeting our guests alone." "Yes, Ms. Rollins." I walked out of my office. I did not go to conference room B. I went to the small, secure file cabinet where I kept the company's foundational documents. I retrieved 2 items, the plastic hospital bracelet and the black frame containing the $20 bill. When I entered the conference room, they were already there. Sarah and David, looking like stone-faced guardians, sat on one side of the small table. On the other side sat Gareth and Miriam. They were not the people I remembered. They were old. They looked small, crumpled, their faces pale and puffy. Miriam was visibly trembling, clutching a wet tissue in her hand. Gareth just stared at the table, his face ashen. The power dynamic, the one that had defined my entire life, had been utterly inverted. The folding chair was now at the head of the table. Miriam saw me and leaped to her feet, a terrible wailing sound emerging from her. "Rebecca, oh baby, Rebecca, please, please, you have to help us." "Sit down, Mrs. Brooke," David said, his voice quiet but sharp. "This is a formal meeting." She collapsed back into her chair. We're so sorry," Gareth stammered, his eyes darting between me and the lawyer. It was a long time ago. We just wanted to secure Lena's future. It was just a practical decision. We paid it all back. We paid every single cent. It's completed. It's done." I stood at the head of the table. I said nothing. I let the sound of Miriam's pathetic sobs fill the air. I let their terror soak into the room. Then, I placed the items on the table, one by one. The click of each one hitting the polished wood was the only sound. First, the plastic hospital bracelet. Click. Address, undetermined. Second, the framed $20 bill. Click. My inheritance. Third, I slid the new bank document across the table, the one with the red boxes. Click. And the loan application. Gareth flinched. Miriam stopped crying. She stopped. She just stared at the paper. She saw her own signature, highlighted. She saw the proof. "You are here," I said, my voice low and clear, "because you are in legal jeopardy. You are here because you, Miriam, committed aggravated identity theft and wire fraud. And you, Gareth, co-signed and confessed to it. The bank, as of this morning, has requested my final affidavit. I have, on my desk, a single piece of paper. If I sign it, you will both be arrested." Miriam let out a strangled gasp. "Please," Gareth whispered, his practical facade completely gone, leaving only a terrified, weak old man. "Please, don't. Think of Lena. Think of her. Her new job. She told us. She got a job. Here. Don't ruin this for her." "This," I said, my voice like a razor, "is not about Lena. This is about you. This is about balancing the books." I looked at them. The rage was still there, a white-hot core. But Mr. Keegan was right. I would not let the wound steer. I would use the furnace to forge the final, correct piece of the system. "I am not interested in revenge," I said. "Revenge is inefficient. I am interested in restitution. I am interested in fixing the system you broke." I nodded to David. He slid a thick, bound document across the table. "This is a legally binding settlement and reimbursement agreement," David said, his voice all business. "You will not be reimbursing Ms. Rollins. You will be making a foundational $5,000 donation to a new entity at North Star Grid. It is called the Real Chairs Fund." I locked eyes with my mother. "Its purpose is to provide vocational apprenticeships and scholarships to young people in this city who have been systemically overlooked. It is for every person who was told to sit on a folding chair while someone else's future was prioritized. You will sign this. You will wire the $5,000 within 24 hours. In exchange, I will not sign the bank's affidavit, I will not press charges, and you will never, ever, contact me or my company again. We will be, as you said, completed." Gareth reached for the pen, his hand shaking so violently he could barely hold it. Just as he was about to sign, the conference room door opened. It was Lena. She was holding her phone, her face flushed with excitement. "Sarah? They said you were in here. I just got the offer email. I... She stopped. She saw our parents. She saw the lawyer. She saw the 3 items on the table. The bracelet, the $20, the loan application with her name visible in the text. Her face, bright with joy, collapsed. What is this? Mom? Dad? What is going on?" Miriam just wept. Gareth couldn't speak. Lena looked at the documents. Her eyes were sharp, just as they had been in the warehouse. She pieced it together, faster than I thought she would. She looked at the loan, at the forged signature. "For Lena's future." "Oh my God," she whispered. She looked at our parents. You did this? You kicked her out, and then you used her? For me?" She backed away from them, horrified. Then she looked at me. It was the first time she had truly seen me, not as Ms. Rollins, as Rebecca. "You knew," she said. Her voice was hollow. "You knew all of this, yesterday, when I was on the warehouse floor. You knew they had done this. And you gave me the test. You gave me the job." "The hiring committee gave you the job," I corrected her, my voice softening for the first time. "The system worked. That was business. This," I nodded to the papers, "is balancing the books." Lena looked at the document, the Real Chairs Fund. She read the description. She looked at our parents, their faces a mask of shame. Then she looked at Sarah, my head of HR. I accept the 90-day offer, she said, her voice shaking, but firm. And I have a condition. I want 20% of my pre-tax salary for the first 3 months to be voluntarily garnished. I want it contributed directly to this fund, as my own payment, my own responsibility. I stared at her. Ben was right. She had courage. She was not just accepting a job. She was accepting the weight of her own past. She was choosing to sit in a real chair and pay for it. I nodded to Sarah. Amend the offer letter. Document her contribution. I turned back to my parents. Sign? There was no grand, cinematic reunion. There was no forgiveness. There were no hugs. It was the quiet, sterile, and deeply satisfying sound of a pen scratching on paper. It was a transaction. My mother signed, her hand guided by my father's. They were 2 broken components being removed from my system. David and Sarah witnessed the signatures. Sarah stamped the documents with the corporate seal. Click. It's done, David said. He stood. Chloe will validate your parking. Please exit the building. I watched them go. 2 old, gray people, walking out of my life, leaving only the signed paper behind. Lena stood alone, stuck between her past and her future. Rebecca, she started, her voice breaking. Ben is your manager, I said, walking to the door. I didn't look back. Report to him on Monday, 9 a.m. Don't be late. The next day, North Star Grid issued a press release. It announced the formation of the Real Chairs Fund, seeded by a significant private donation, to provide vocational grants to underserved youth in Denver. The story was picked up immediately. I was in my office. The city was spread out before me, a perfect, logical grid. I walked, one last time, into the empty interview room. I walked to the small silver recorder on the table and pressed the stop button. The tiny red light blinked off. I went to the shelf. I reached out and put my hand on the cool glass of the black frame. I tapped the faded, creased $20 bill, my first, last, and only inheritance. From now on, I whispered to the empty room, all seats are real seats. I looked out the window. The stubborn, permanent snow on the high peaks was finally breaking. The wind had shifted. A fine, clean mist was rolling in, the sharp edges of the world softening. The snow was turning to rain. A new cycle was beginning. The old system was closed. A new order was being written. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. So drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and if you want to support us, hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.